In this video, we're going to go over queen excluders, honey supers, removal aids, and storage. So the first thing we're going to cover, as I mentioned, is queen excluders. They make plastic queen excluders, but I advise you to stay away from these. I've just shown you so that you know what to kind of stay away from based on, I guess, my recommendations. But plastic queen excluders have really sharp edges, and the bees don't like them. It tears up the bees. So just so you know about it, they're not very good. Bees don't like them. Then we have metal queen excluders, and just as the name implies, they're all metal. And when you look at queen excluders, I don't know if this camera's going to pick this up, but these crossbars right here, that's the bottom, or at least that's what I refer to as the bottom. I like to put all my queen excluders the same direction. So it goes on there. There's not a lot of space between the bottom of the queen excluder and the top of your frames, but they work really well. The bees will still go through them. These are probably the most common just because they're kind of budget. You know, they're in the $8 to $10 range. And then we have the wooden ones, and again they have the crossbar and that goes to the bottom. That's usually your deeper side on these. These are about double the money. They're in the $20+ range, and but they do, because they're elevated with a wood frame, they give a little more space between the top of the top bars and the bottom of the excluder, so the bees can move around a little more freely. One word of caution is you do not have all your equipment. You don't want to be throwing these around. It just takes a little bit of a bend, and the queen will get through there. She'll find it if she really is motivated. You'll hear our instructors talk a lot about calling these honey excluders, and there's a reason for that, especially with new equipment. Our nectar flows can vary quite often. A lot of times they're not real strong, so that slows the bees down, especially on new equipment. You really want to get those bees up and get everything drawn out. A real good use of these, though, is if the queen does manage to come up into your honey super and lay out eggs, larvae, and brood, you're going to want that out of there. So when you do one of your inspections, you notice her up there, you can place her back down in the main brood chambers, and then you can put your queen excluder on, and then you can put your honey supers back on, and that brood will develop and hatch out, and it will move out, and then the bees, hopefully you'll still have a nectar flow going, and the bees will come back up and they'll backfill all that space with nectar and cap it off for your honey. So that's the primary, what most people around in this area do. You know, we have all these microclimates, but it's pretty common. Another time is if you're using comb honey, which we're not going to go over. Your instructors, your mentors can talk to you about producing comb honey, and so we'll save that for later. Okay. So now let's talk about your honey supers and kind of how much they weigh and difference between some of the options you have. So we refer to these as westerns, and that's pretty much the common term for the honey supers around here, and these are very, very popular. And so you got one right here, and a lot of people will probably put, depending on the strength of their hive, they'll probably put two on. In the beginning, you'll probably put one on, but as that's starting to draw out, you'll probably put your second one on. And remember, you always want to give your bees lots of space, so this helps. Now, westerns will 10 frame. It will weigh 45 to 55 pounds. Somewhere in that range, typically around 45, 48 pounds. It kind of will depend on if your frames are spread apart a little bit. They'll draw them a little deeper, and so you get a little more honey that way. 8 frame honey supers, they'll typically weigh 35 to 45 pounds, so an average of about 40 pounds. So you can see there's a little bit of difference in the weight between 8 frame and 10 frame. Either one works. I prefer 10 frame. Now let's talk about using a brood chamber or a deep box for a honey super and the difference in that. So a deep box or a brood chamber box, 8 or 10 frame, it's going to weigh considerably more. And a 10 frame deep box will weigh 85 to 100 pounds, again depending on the spacing and how well the bees draw it out and backfill everything. So you can see it's quite a bit heavier than just a standard 10 frame super. And 8 frame is no different. It'll weigh 65 to 85 pounds. So it's quite heavy. But one of the advantages of using a deep is you're going to get a lot of drawn comb that you can use next year, some really new comb in case you want to expand or anything. You also could save a couple frames for your honey bank, and we'll be talking about that for winter time in another video. And it is quite a bit heavier, but there's some advantages to using a deep versus a western. So especially if you have a problem down in your brood chamber, you could transfer these down there and be able to fill that space as needed. So sometimes people like to have all their equipment the same so they can interchange everything much easier. So that kind of hopefully covers the honey super part. Now let's talk about removing your honey supers and getting the bees out of them. So we'll go back to the westerns, and so I'm just going to put one on here just to show you. So if you have your western on, most people, they will just take out a bee brush and they will sweep off the bees, and it works real well. And they'll have an empty honey super, no frames in it, and they'll have a drip board or a piece of plywood, and you'll sweep the bees off and you'll stick it in that super. And then to cover it, you can put a lid over the top or a pillowcase or a piece of burlap, because the bees are going to find that, and your ultimate goal is to get the bees off of there so that you can store or later extract your honey. So that works really, really well. That's one option right there. Another option is using a bee escape. And so a bee escape looks a lot like an inner cover. For those of you using an inner cover, it has a round hole in the top, and on the bottom side it's a triangle, and it's got some channels in it with a wire mesh over it. And what happens is the bees will go down through the hole and they'll come out this triangle, and they can't figure out how to get back in, but they can figure out how to get out, and they get back to the brood chamber. So you place that on your hive, and then you take your honey super, and if you had 2 honey supers on here, you put that on, and then you would have your lid on top of this. And so when you put your lid on, if you have an upper entrance and a one-piece migratory style lid, you want to make sure that's closed up. If you're using a telescopic setup with an inner cover, it's got a notch in it, and so you would put that on and you would slide your telescopic cover up and block that entrance. Also, you're going to want to use duct tape or clear packing tape. Don't use the painter's tape or regular masking tape. It'll come off pretty easily, and even though this is only going to be on here for 3 to 4 days on the average, any cracks or gaps you want covered up all the way down to the top of your brood chamber, and which would be, right, you'd have your bee escape here and then your brood chamber. So you want to make sure there's no gaps or anything, because the whole idea is to get the bees out, and you don't want yellow jackets or bees coming back in. And so the bees will go out through that. It'll take a few days, and they get out. And so after a few days, like say 3 days, you go back in, and you can start pulling your honey supers. Now, if there's some bees left over, if there's a lot, then obviously they haven't moved out. You'll have to recover it and seal it back up. But if there's just a few bees and you want them out, then grab your bee brush and sweep them off, and that'll work just fine, okay? So now let's talk about what to do with your supers when you pull them off. And I apologize because I got to keep turning my back to you because I don't have an assistant. So I use a drip board. A lot of guys do. And your drip board can be, mine's out of plywood with a 3/4 inch rim all the way around, and that's to catch any dripping honey, obviously. And it's sealed all the way. There's no entrance on it, so that's the whole purpose. Is we want to keep everything out, keep everything nice and clean. So you can have your drip board here, and then you can have your honey super, and however many you have, and you can just stack them up, and then you can use a spare lid or a piece of plywood. And again, if you have any kind of entrance, you want to seal it up. If any of your boxes have any kind of defect in them, you know, keep it all sealed up, because you definitely want to protect all your bees' hard work and your hard work. And or you can use, a lot of guys now are starting to go to the restaurant supply places, and they got these really nice heavy-duty aluminum pans. Just make sure they'll fit. One on bottom, one on top. That works really well. And maybe, you know, weight. No matter what you use, make sure there's a weight, or I prefer a strap around them if you're going to stick them in your garage, because you're trying to keep the other insects and, you know, any potential rodents out of there. So that pretty much covers that, except for my last topic, which again is a honeybee removal aid. And so there's Fisher's Bee Quick. I've never really used it. A lot of guys like it. And then there's BeeGo. And this is why I'm throwing this into the video, because if you misuse BeeGo, it's not against the law, but your family, friends, relatives, they will let you know, and you will not be welcome. Using it on your honey supers to evacuate the bees, it works really well. I like to use it 70 to 80 degree, maybe 85 degrees. I find 80 degree really is a good temperature to use it. There's a fume board. It's kind of like your inner cover, but it has a felt pad in it, and you squirt it on there and put it on, and the bees leave fairly quick. It doesn't take but maybe 15 minutes or so on a good day. So it doesn't affect the smell or taste of your honey. You pull your boxes, and 2 days later, I hardly ever notice it. But where you'll notice it, so I want to try to throw a little humor in here, because it works really well. You got that pesky coworker that ride shares with you and never pays for gas and always wants you to stop at the grocery store or liquor store, right? Or you got the neighbor that always says, "Hey, I can't go nowhere," especially with COVID. You know, would you go risk your life? That's how you get rid of them. You know, you drive them to the store. Well, put some BeeGo in your car. They'll never ride with you again. So if you're wondering what BeeGo smells like, the best way that I've come up with describing it is your bestest buddy that has really bad athlete's foot, hasn't changed his socks in several weeks, with a combination of probably not showered in those same couple weeks, and has really bad halitosis. That's kind of what BeeGo smells like. So you can see that once you smell it, you probably will never forget that smell. If you get it in your automobile, it's going to be with you for a while. So use your kid's automobile, because he's probably going to get grounded anyway and can't drive, so that'll help him keep from driving. But your family will definitely know that they don't appreciate you if you bring that into the home, and you may find yourself living in a motel room for a week or two. So it's really good stuff, and I'm kind of making light of it. It works really well, but we got to have a little humor, I hope, in these videos, and that you don't mind. I think that about covers it. If you think I missed anything, talk to your instructors or your mentors, and by all means, please support your local beekeeping shops. Those are the guys that you're helping them by supporting them, and they're trying their damnedest to help you understand this crazy world of beekeeping. So thank you, and I appreciate you watching the video.